So capitalism that's based on Catholic social teaching and Catholic social doctrine as defined in Rerum Novarum, if Fortune 500 boards were just all reading Rerum Novarum and following that, their profits would be maximized and the world would be a much better place.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we discover how to run your business like a saint. And today we have got a killer episode for you. We are speaking with the #1 Catholic venture capital investor. That's my words, but I'm very confident in saying them. His name is Tim Connors, and proof that he's the #1 investor is he's actually been named on the Midas List 4 times. If you're not sure what that is, I definitely encourage you to look it up. He has been investing for over 25 years and is currently set on using his influence and success to fix broken systems of all sorts, right? He's not letting anything under the sun out of his sight. If he sees a system that's broken and he believes that he can help the people in that system by fixing it, he will exert any sort of influence that he can upon it. He applies Catholic virtue and Catholic social teaching to every deal he looks at as a first kind of pass to make sure it's good before even considering the opportunity. And a couple of my favorite things about today's conversation are he discusses how he's trying to get canon law changed so that we can have better retention of people who come into our parishes. You'll hear more about that towards the end of the episode. He explains that companies who love their customers the most are the most profitable and have the lowest customer acquisition cost. Again, some big gems he's dropping right in the middle of the episode there. He shared how to be a systems thinker, something I'm very passionate about learning, and he gave some great tips on. And then finally, he shared why every Catholic needs to use their influence to show love to their neighbor to the max degree possible. And he cites some of the encyclicals coming out of the Vatican over the past couple decades. Very, very influential stuff. You're going to love this episode. I would say any Catholic who wants to make an impact on the world and to genuinely use their skills to glorify God should listen to this episode, because Tim, he is one of the best role models for people who are like that, people who want to make that influence. Obviously, we've talked about people like Tom Monahan on the podcast before, but Tim, he's still at it right now. He's still very active, and there's so much you can learn from him. Because he's living, you might be able to work with him or get to partner with him in some ways. I definitely encourage you to listen all the way through this episode, try to get in touch with him, and just see how you can help him achieve the missions that he's after, and together we can really, really change the world. All right, speaking of role models, if you want to surround yourself with other people who are serious about integrating their faith into their businesses, sign up for our peer group. It's called the Catholic Founders Guild, and it only costs $10 a month or $100 a year, so anybody can afford it. There's no excuse. If you are a builder and you are Catholic, this is the place for you. Just go to our Substack and click Upgrade to Paid. Any tier will get you into the group. All right, we'll see you there. Enjoy the episode. All right, Tim, welcome to the show today. How you doing?
Doing great.
I'm
Thanks for having me.
super excited to have you, man. It's been a while coming. I know we had to reschedule once, but I really appreciate you making the time. So a lot of people who are in our community who listen to this pod will probably know you already, but can you just give a kind of a really high level summary of what you're up to today and maybe some of your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tim Connors. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, youngest of 8 in a big Irish Catholic family. A lot of love, not a lot of extra money. So we struggled. Mom and Dad didn't admit it at the time, did a good job of hiding it other than the obvious stress, but they struggled to make it to payday for a lot of years. So that was good for me, because if I wanted any spending money, I had to earn it. So I had a paper route as a young boy in Fort Wayne, and then I mowed lawns and shoveled snow. And if I wanted spending money or money for college, I was generating it. So grew up there. That was fun. Half my family went to Purdue. Half of them went to Notre Dame. If I went to Purdue, I didn't have to work. If I went to Notre Dame, I had to work. So I picked Notre Dame and then worked about 30 hours a week while being in school full time. And Dad wanted everybody to be an engineer. So I started coding in high school. The math teacher at my high school was awesome. They had remodeled my high school the year before I started, and they put in a VAX computer. And the math teacher would come in early before school and stay late and teach us to code. And I took to coding like a fish in water. It was the most fun thing I'd ever done. So started coding in high school, did electrical engineering and computer science at Notre Dame, and then got a chance to get a full ride to Stanford to get a master's in the same. That's what took me to Silicon Valley. And then I was pretty much in Silicon Valley my whole career up until about 2.5 years ago, when COVID changed everything, and we can talk about what it did to tech and venture. I started out as a coder, worked at a big company, and then went to a little startup that we turned into a public company. and then went to business school and then started coaching founders in startups. Gosh, 27 years ago now. And now that's what I do all day, every day. So I coach early stage founders. I'm usually first check, first coach, primary coach, and usually get involved before they have product, usually they have an idea of the problem they want to solve and a little bit of an idea of the solution. But I don't care that much about what they think the solution is because it's always wrong. We have a process on how we iterate to get to the right answer. So the fact that the attributes of the founder and the unmet need they're trying to solve and their why answer to the question is usually the most important thing. And then jump in and coach. And it's a lot of fun. You learn a lot when they work, and when they don't work, they're more fun when they work. And when they work, it's really fun because everything I'm doing is, has the opportunity to really make the world a better place. So when they work, not only do you do well personally, but you do a lot of good in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it the most rewarding.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're somebody who, in all the people I've bumped into, you're kind of well known as the number one VC who's Catholic, right? And I'm just curious, has this been always a characteristic of you? Have you really kept your faith through the whole journey of being in Silicon Valley, being an investor? Can you tell a little bit more about that? Because I assume it's a compounding effect that over the many, many years, you've become known as this kind of the Catholic VC.
Oh, well, that's fun. That's awesome. If that's the rep. It's really fun. It's a journey. The Holy Spirit kind of, discloses to you just the right amount of information that you can handle at the right time. We grew up Catholic, going to church every Sunday. Mom always taught us to say our prayers and do unto others, the two greatest commandments. And went to Catholic grade school, and then couldn't afford the local public high school or the Catholic high school, so went to public high school, which was awesome. I met some amazing people there, and then went to Notre Dame. So I went through Catholic school a lot. And then I got out to Silicon Valley, and it was like a completely different world. And it was interesting because I was struggling at first to figure out how to connect what Mom taught me to business. And a lot of the role models in Silicon Valley are, they're good people at the core, but a lot of unformed folks. So they're not bad people. They're just oftentimes not well-formed people. And then there are some folks that are really kind of troubled because they don't have that formation. And so I saw a lot of stuff happening in business, and I never really could quite correlate, how to put that back into my faith. And then had a really fun kind of breakthrough experience where a guy named Peter Kilpatrick, who's now the president of Catholic University, was the dean of engineering at Notre Dame. And when you have some success, you always try to give a little bit to your alma mater, and then good alma maters are great at trying to get you involved with your time and talent, so you keep giving more. And so they put me on this engineering advisory council, and Peter was the dean. And I said to Peter, Peter, if you just want people who write checks and smile and say you're doing great, pick somebody else. But if you really want somebody who's going to challenge you and coach you, let me know. So he said, bring it on. And so we had a wonderful relationship. We did all kinds of amazing things at Notre Dame Engineering, ran into some bottlenecks at levels above that kind of blocked some of the innovation stuff we wanted to do to have the biggest possible impact. But Peter's awesome. And then now Peter's president at Catholic University and doing amazing things over there. And so he, a couple of years ago, decided, hey, Tim, let's get the band back together. And finally I listened. And a year ago, I joined the board of Catholic U, which has just been a wonderful, wonderful experience. But the thing that was amazing for me is he shared, for the first time, he shared this encyclical by Pope Benedict, Caritas in Veritate. And that encyclical was like the Rosetta Stone for me. That really for me made it clear how to tie back what Mama taught me as a kid to how do I do good live the two greatest commandments in my work. And he's much more articulate than me, but Benedict basically says, solve the real need of your neighbor with your work. If you do that, you're loving them. So solve the real need of your neighbor, do it with your God-given skills, talents, and then do it with the max degree of influence you have in the polis, he calls it, in the world. So, solve the real need of your neighbor, that's the second greatest commandment. Do it with your God-given skills, that's the first. And then just do it with everything you got, right? And once I read that, for me, it was like, okay, now I get it. And then a whole bunch of stuff I was seeing people do and a bunch of stuff I was seeing, venture capitalists do was like, hey, wait a minute. This is either not solving a real need in the world or it's hurting people more than helping them. And there's there's a VC from a fairly famous firm that likes to, say, I only fund the 7 deadly sins, for example. So, you can certainly make money taking advantage of people or addicting them to sports betting or jeweling or giving them predatory lending products. You can make good money doing that stuff. It's actually easier to if you love your customer and make their life better because then they tell their friends. So your cost of customer acquisition goes down. So, but there's a lot of stuff that gets funded that just inherently is just making the world worse, not better. And so that once I read Cartas and really studied it and learned it, then I'm like, okay, now I understand. Let me have a first filter on a deal of like, hey, is this actually making the world better or worse? And the best returns I've had are deals that fundamentally make their customers' lives better.
Mhm.
And, it's really fun because you get a founder who's really mission focused that way. And they're some of the most fun founders to work with. They're some of the most passionate founders. They have no quit because their why of why they're starting that startup often is really, really rich. But nobody's like the Jewel guys. They didn't start that company to get people addicted to nicotine. They kind of landed on it. It's like how proud can you be of your work if that's your legacy, right? I often encourage people just find that thing you're really passionate about, that real need you want to solve of your neighbor. And if you're passionate about it, in the dark days when startups are hard, they're harder than they are easy. And when it's the hard days, if you've got a good answer to the why, you can't imagine living your life without solving this problem. Then you quit. And that's probably the biggest thing is founders not quitting. So that's where it all started. And then like the Holy
And
Spirit.
what year was that roughly? Like when did that kind of
Oh
transformation really happen?
that was probably 15 years ago or so. I'd have to think, but yeah, and that's really when it started. Then it was like, aha, I get it. And then the Holy Spirit kind of peels the onion for you every
Yeah.
year, and then it's like, So I often say the Holy Spirit's got to hit me upside the head for me to listen sometimes,
Yeah.
but I finally get it ultimately. So I'm sure in a year or 2 years
It'll
from now,
change,
I'll say, oh
right?
gosh, I didn't know a thing in
Yeah.
July of 2025. But it's really an amazing journey, and just that he gives you what you need when you need it, and once you just surrender to him and say, what do you want me to do? Then all of it's a lot easier.
Yeah. This episode of Catholic Founders is sponsored by FIO, the streaming platform built for Catholic creators and audiences. Think Spotify, but exclusively with Catholic content. And you know what caught my attention about FIO is it's not just another streaming service. They're actually solving how Catholic business owners reach engaged, faithful Catholic audiences who are actively seeking content that's aligned with their beliefs. And right now they've got a very special offer. They're offering free advertising space for Catholic entrepreneurs, no risk and no commitment. This is your chance to reach Catholics that you cannot find anywhere else. Just head to fio.fm/ads. That's fio.fm/ads to sign up for this free advertising opportunity. The FIO app is available on iOS and Android, with web coming soon. All right, back to the show. It seems maybe obvious to a lot of Catholic entrepreneurs listening, but you mentioned something that effectively once the deals you were looking at passed the initial test of, hey, is this good for like helping your neighbor? Does this pass the virtuous test, if you will? Like could you say more about, like, it sounds a bit obvious, but virtuous founders or people who are pursuing a certain good and have a good in mind as the outcome, they tend to do a little bit better. Can you say more about like just maybe some of the obvious things that seem obvious or things that you've learned through that experience or seen?
Yeah, so I usually talk about three attributes of a founder that I care most about: smarts, goodness, and grit. So smarts. Startups are a race against the clock, right? You have a certain amount of time to figure it out. And if you listen really well to your data, almost all startups can be successful, right? Almost every founder gets the unmet need right. It's just a matter of, can you iterate fast enough and listen to your data and your customers well enough that you can get to the right answer on product market channel fit. And we can talk about, it's not just product market, it's product market channel is the biggest thing. So founders that are successful tend to just have a really fast motor, right? So just a lot of really good raw intelligence. That's been pretty key, because the faster you learn, the faster you iterate. That's really important. So smarts is important. Goodness and grit are the other two. Grit's kind of easy. When the going gets tough, do you quit? And the number one reason why startups fail is founders quit. So you got to have grit. And then goodness kind of has a number of different components. So empathy. Do you overexpress for empathy? Lloyd Tabb, one of my successful founders, awesome on so many things. But one of the things he always says is startups are an act of empathy. right? Just like Caritas and Veritate, what's the real need of your customer? You got to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. What is their problem, and really understanding their problem. So folks that overexpress for empathy are amazing founders. Self-awareness is next to empathy under the goodness category. Are you self-confident enough to know what you know and don't know so you can tell your coach so we can coach you? If you hide information, it just delays your ability to iterate. So my founders that are self-confident enough to say, hey, Tim, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. Help me. The best thing I can ever hear from a founder, right? Because then I can help them. And then moral compass. So do you always do the right thing when nobody's looking? And those are the most tragic stories for founders when a founder struggles with a moral compass problem. That's personally tragic, and it's such a bummer. Every once in a while, somebody with a troubled moral compass will sneak into the portfolio. I try to really screen on that, and it tends to never end well. So if you got smarts, goodness, and grit, and under goodness, you've got this combination of empathy, self-awareness, and a really strong moral compass. Almost every founder can be successful. I don't think I've ever backed a founder who didn't have the unmet need right. Sometimes they've had to pivot a little bit along the way, either on the solution or the unmet need. But if they got those three attributes, then we tend to be able to do a good job coaching them. And they don't all work, but enough of them work where you get
Yeah.
your LPs good returns and do a lot of good in the world.
How do you exactly screen for, especially the goodness part? Because I can imagine that's not necessarily, it can be a little bit difficult to figure that stuff out, right? How do you do that?
It's lots of years of interacting with founders, number one. So I get a good feel for people. My wife's actually probably the best read of people that I've ever met. She's amazing at really understanding what somebody's all about. During COVID, I did a lot of calls from my living room, and she would listen in, and right after the call's over, she would tell me whether she thought I should be in business with that person or not. And I've never seen her be wrong on it. I need to listen to her more the way I listen to the Holy Spirit as much as I can. So that's one. And then reference checking is a big one. So most of my deals are referred deals. Very rare that I'll back a founder who's not well known in my network. And so good entrepreneurs hunt in packs. So I try to do as good of a job as I can for my current founders. And then they are the ones that tee up their next startup and their friend startups. And it's those referred deals. Then you're taking a lot less team risk because you got somebody who's known somebody for years and years and years. So like there's a bunch of investors who do it differently. Like I would never be an investor that just like shows up at a demo day at Y Combinator and starts writing checks.
Mm-hmm.
That's very uncomfortable for me. So I like it much better when there's a good pathway to get the true scope of what somebody's all about. And we got some fun AI that's being built in the portfolio that's going to allow me to do. I'll have an AI VC associate here shortly from one of my companies. And we'll be able to do a lot of really good work on reference checking, really thorough reference checking and market analysis with AI assist that I do it a lot today, but I can do it even better. And when somebody's troubled and they end up in the portfolio, they sneak in and you're always like, oh, man, how did I not see it? And then usually it's, the smoother they are at hiding some of their issues, sometimes the smoother they are at convincing you to fast track and skip some of the steps on your diligence. So, but fortunately, that doesn't happen very often. But it's really what's that person's reputation in a second degree way. So who knows that person well and who trusts them, and that's probably the second one. But I got pretty good spidey sense now. I probably get it right 95% of the time.
I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I was gonna say if you've been I think you've been listed if I'm not mistaken on the Midas list. I think what 3 times. So you definitely 4 now. Okay, nice. So you're definitely up there. But it means you've got a good read. And I'll have to probably check out that the reference checking software for my recruitment stuff. Would be awesome to have. But I did want to ask you one thing. I've never heard this before. That the best founders tend to. I think you said hunt in packs. Like why?
Yeah.
Why?
They find each other. So they learn from each other, and then good, connects with good. Great connects with great. So some of my best deals have been deals that were referred to me by somebody that I've worked with before. For example, like Lloyd Tabbett Looker, who I mentioned. I met him, got a chance to work with him on a board at a company that didn't work before I backed him at Looker. So I got a chance he was referred to me by this founder I backed because he's like, hey, Lloyd's joining the board. And then I got a chance to see him in action. And then so when he co-founded one startup that didn't work. And then he started this other startup. So it was kind of third time was a charm for Lloyd. He built a company. Looker ended up selling to Google for, I think it was $2.6 billion. It was lovely. that was a twofer because it not only was a great outcome in that deal, but it really helped the rest of the portfolio and tons of startups to listen to their customers and their data better. It was a really awesome data platform company. And then another one, like Chime.com had the idea for Chime, was kind of hunting for founders in that area. And a founder that I had success with, I shared with him my little write up. And I have all these 2-pagers that I write on stuff that should exist that I haven't seen yet. And I shared it with him, and he referred me to the founder of Chime. So once you get referred with somebody that's well known, then it's just, it just makes it so much easier. It's less risky than to back somebody that isn't well known to anybody, right? That was probably the hardest thing once venture went from being a very, where almost all the elite founders were in Silicon Valley to now it's all over the world. I'm meeting some amazing people from everywhere.
That's awesome.
That whole ability to reference checks is interesting because it's gotten so fragmented now.
Yeah, a little more difficult.
That's definitely changed. A lot of stuff's changed since COVID in venture, but that's one of them. Is how do you really vet? How do you really vet these guys to make sure they're somebody you want to, you back somebody and your reputation blends with theirs. And so if somebody's not trustworthy, it shows badly on you too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to shift a little bit here. Somebody in preparation for this, I was doing a bit of research. Somebody told me that you are a very clear systems thinker, and it's obvious from the short amount of time we've been chatting that is true. And I personally find myself to be I have a very difficult time getting my thoughts organized. That's why I do podcasting, because I can spit it out and then maybe think about it later. And after I heard that comment about you, I heard I think David Perel had said something that the only way you can think, the way you think is based on the way you live. So I was just kind of curious if there is a certain way that you live that helps you to think in this way. And is this something that people like me can learn who are not naturally inclined to it?
Yeah, no, systems thinking's a blast. Folks that have grown up and have been attracted to STEM majors have a tendency to think more in systems than others, I found, but anybody can learn how to do it. But my wife, thankfully, is very patient with me because my life is interesting because I've got to, if I start funding stuff that's obvious now, it's too late, right? Because I'm a first check pre-seed investor, right? So I got to be thinking about what's the world going to look like in 6 or 8 years, and then I'm backing that far before it's obvious to anybody. So I spend a lot of my time, I read like crazy, and then I just think in a way that says, okay, if you take those unmet needs in the world, who's trying to serve them today, and how is that system broken? Right? So 42 million people hungry in America when we throw away 20% of the food we manufacture. That's a broken system. So then it's kind of fun if you think about in a systematic way, right? There's people that think in policy, right? All our folks in office, national, local, et cetera, they think in policy. So how do we change policy to affect outcomes? There's folks that work in nonprofits, amazing people that work in nonprofits that think in programs, nonprofit programs. So we got 42 million people hungry. What program do we develop to serve those 42 million people that are hungry? The third leg of the stool after policy and programs is systems. And it's like, okay, why is the system broken that creates 42 million hungry people in America in a world with 20% of excess food thrown away? And then how do you fix the system, right? What's changed in the world that allows you to fix that system today where you couldn't fix it 10 years ago? So if you start to think in that way, it starts to really reframe the kind of stuff you think about. Like consumer banking, used to be great and then got really bad. And Elizabeth Warren's been yelling at the banks for 20 years to get rid of overdraft fees and monthly maintenance fees. When I was a kid, if we had overdraft fees and monthly maintenance fees, my parents wouldn't have made it, right? So you get 2 days from payday, you run out of money. And now the bank not only declines your charge, but they charge you a $35 overdraft fee. Well, by the time you realize you've overdrafted, often you've got 2, 3, 4 overdraft charges. So then you start the next pay period $105 behind and you can never catch up. So we said, hey, so I looked at consumer banking and I looked at the market caps of the incumbents, the B of A's, the Wells Fargo's, the Cap Ones, et cetera. And it was wild. You see these massive market caps and you see negative NPS scores. Consumers hate those companies. And they hate them primarily because of these fees. Right? Not only do they not pay you for your savings, but they jam you with these fees when you run out of money. So we just started a bank that now it's obvious, but it's like, hey, why don't we create a the why now was everybody's got a smartphone. So we said, okay, you've got a smartphone, and let's put an app on the phone and have a debit card. And obvious now was not obvious at all.
What
14
year
years.
did that start? Oh, 14 years
This
ago.
was about 15-ish years ago. And now Chime went public, a couple weeks ago, 12 billion market cap, doing great, 8.5 million accounts. The most important thing was we just started a bank that just wasn't going to rip off the customer. It was really that
It
simple.
sounds so obvious, right? But
Sounds
some
obvious.
people just decide not to do it, you know?
Everybody in banking told me I was crazy, that this would never work. Nobody'd ever trust. Right? So the more the incumbents tell you it's impossible, usually the better. We just started a bank that didn't rip people off. So instead of making money on crazy overdraft fees, just made money on interchange as people use their debit card to pay for their goods and services. And it's turned out to be a great business. Well, what the most interesting thing was about 2 years ago, we and other fast followers in that neo banking area had so much success that then the big guys had to start to adjust competitively. So now there's 100 million American families spending way less on overdraft fees, and so our value, we did great, but we kind of changed the whole industry, and that was really wonderful. So do well while doing good is kind of how that fits together. If you think in a nonprofit world, right? There's a lot of people that there's billions of dollars a year granted to nonprofits to help people with financial literacy. But if your bank's stealing $100 from you when you overdraft, it's hard to catch up. So now with AI and tech, so it used to be tech-enabled systems, now it's AI and tech-enabled systems. Man, the stuff you can do now to solve some of those things that just seem like they were unsolvable before, it's just amazing. So we're going, if you go down the list of the average income American family and every one of their line items on income and budget, and you look at almost every line item, there's big, huge market caps and lots of bad NPS scores. So we're just picking off nearly every category now with solutions that can just allow people to have, a few more bucks at the end of the month. If you grew up in that environment, I grew up in that environment, an extra $100, $200, $300 a month at payday can make the difference between being homeless or thriving. And so because these markets are so massive, because 2/3 of American families struggle to make it to payday, these markets are huge. So you apply a little bit of AI and tech to think about, okay, here's the broken system. How do we fix the system? If you think in a systems way, you can really come up with pretty interesting solutions. Like we've got a solution to homelessness now, which is rolling out around the country. It's really fun. And it took me about 10 years to figure out the system, but it's a 3-step system. And there's a little bit of a role for the nonprofit program folks, who are amazing people. And then there's a little bit of role for the policy folks who are awesome. And then the big solution to ending the root cause of the problem is a system solution. That's step 3, which from this portfolio company of mine called cloudapartments.com, using AI and tech to take 30% of the cost out of building apartments. And if you take 30%
Amazing.
of the cost out, you can charge a lot less rent.
Yeah.
It unlocks a whole bunch of interesting financing, and so that one's a lot of fun. That's the way you can learn it. Stanford has a symbolic systems major. I wish more schools had it. Some schools talk about design thinking, which can be systems oriented. Sometimes people think design thinking is more UI only. But yeah, I think Stanford's pretty innovative with this symbolic systems. And the people that have come out of that major have gone on to do amazing things.
Yeah.
When you're able to think that way. But yeah, it's fun. I talk to a lot of founders, and they'll tell me the unmet need and the solution they're trying to solve. And, we start going down systems land pretty quick.
So was this something that was natural to you, or as part of this, do you have to basically make time in your day to try to think through because you said you read a lot, right? So do you have to make time to think through these things and start to visualize them like blocks and how they work together, or how do you actually go about that? Because you've got this all
Yeah.
very nicely laid out.
Yeah, it now comes so naturally. Again, patience to my wife. I talk these through. So I talk through things a lot, and then I write these 2-pagers that I'll read tons and tons and tons. I spend lots of time on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's been really interesting because you find an area that you think is interesting, and then you start following people who are working in that industry, and then you start following the people that are commenting on those folks' commentary. And it's like a big conference every day. You can drill down and learn all this stuff. And then I see a ton of companies, and then a lot of times there'll be like 50 or 100 folks kind of dancing around a solution. And then you start to figure out, okay, what is the killer solution? So then I'll typically, if I haven't seen a company, I'll write up a little 2-pager that's kind of a system design document, basically, of here's how the world is today and what's changed, and now how can that enable you to do something very different. And then I share those pretty broadly. And then most of the time I'll ultimately find a founder that, we're completing each other's sentences, like Curtis at Cloud Apartments. I had researched that area for years. And so when Curtis started pitching me, I think he made it through half his pitch before I offered to invest, because I just had done so much research on the unmet need and what the potential solution was. And then we mind meld and start working together. And then I'll share 2-pagers on lots of other things. And so once you start thinking in a systems way, like I joined the board at Catholic University and they were in the middle of losing some money, as opposed to being, cash flow positive. And so you start just then thinking about the system, and then you come up with the key metrics that define whether the system's working or not. And then you share those metrics, and smart people, once they know what the mission and the customer and the metrics are, they do amazing things. So we just got aligned on the right metrics, and university went from losing money to this year we should throw off a good amount of positive cash flow. And then we're doing some really innovative AI stuff at Catholic U, so we should be able to throw off really interesting cash flow following year. But it's just, so it can work in, parishes, can work in the planet, can work in families, can work in companies. So I tend to I coach now all kinds of different folks, and it all comes back to that. What's the system? What's working in the system? What's not working in the system? How do you change the system? And I've never been more excited than I am right now in all my years in tech that AI applied to try to do good for customers. You can do a lot of evil with AI, as we've seen with some folks. But if you're intentional to do good with it, man, you can do good at a scale we've never seen before.
Yeah. A lot of investors, like the very savvy investors, are super focused on just like maximizing ROI, right? And this especially comes in the private equity world, maybe a little bit more so than VC. But this kind of has given a sort of macro bad rap to capitalism. And you are investing in companies that are actually helping a lot of people. And at the end of the day, you're lowering people's bills and all these things. So I guess I'm just curious, like as a Catholic, how do you approach the investing perspective, or what should be the framework that they should look through it, that we should look through it as? Because we're not just here to maximize ROIs, at the expense of humans or whatever. We're not trying to put a bunch of people out of work or these things. How do you think about this as a Catholic, applying that lens to getting a return on your investment?
Yeah, it is a great area. There's this false dichotomy that people have been taught that that you lose money, that it's a zero-sum game, and that somebody's got to lose for you to win. And folks that take on that mindset tend to do a lot of destruction in the world. What I found in my companies, and I've got some Harvard Business School professors that I'm nudging to try to do the research on this, because if it comes out from them, it'll be game-changing. But my belief is that you do better in all asset classes if you love your customer. You actually do better. Now, there's reasons for that, because NPS, the Net Promoter Score stuff, has been researched for decades, where like NPS, Net Promoter Score, is if you've ever taken a flight on United Airlines, that afternoon or the next day, you'll get an email that says, based on your experience on this flight, how likely to refer United Airlines to your friends and colleagues. And people rate it 0 to 10. The folks that love you, right, that say, wow, absolutely, I'd refer United to my friends. They care enough to talk about it with their friends, and they'll talk about it positively. Like, wow, I just had the best flight on United. Man, those guys are really starting to figure it out. Right? If they have a really bad experience that they rate you 0, 1, or 2, right, they're also going to tell their friends, like, oh, I just had the worst. United's the worst airline. I'm never flying them again, right? The people in the middle who are like a 4, 5, or 6, they don't care enough to talk about it, so they're not going to talk about you. So NPS says what percentage of people are talking positively about you minus the percentage that are talking negatively. And that score has been proven to be highly predictive of profits, revenue, growth, market cap, et cetera. Well, NPS is really just, how much do you love me, right, as a customer, right? It's a secular way to ask the second greatest commandment question, or the first question in Pope Benedict's Caritas document. So the data is there that the more you love your customer, the better you should do as a business. And we see it all day, every day in terms of like Chime. Chime gets over half of their customers with no customer acquisition cost. It's referrals from current customers, because the current customers love Chime. So they tell their friends, so their friends adopt. So then that makes Chime a better business than a bank that's trying to rip people off, right? That has to go spend marketing to get every single customer. It also gets your customer to stay with you longer. If you treat them well, they stay. So you get higher retention and lower CAC. It's a great combo. So we've gotten in the habit, I'm an engineer, I'm not an economist or a historian, but I've been trying to read this system of how did we get here? And there's some really interesting work. So Pope Leo the 13th, who founded Catholic University, wrote an awesome encyclical called Rerum Novarum back at the turn of the century, back in the last industrial revolution. And so it's awesome that Cardinal Prevost chose Leo the 14th for this next AI-driven industrial revolution. He gets it. He gets it very, very deeply into his core. He's a STEM guy too. He's a math guy from Villanova. That, if you look back at capitalism, it's really fascinating. Or capitalism is better than any other system anybody has developed before. But we got into a bad habit. And when I've been reading about it, it seems to have all started around the 60s and 70s when this guy, Milton Friedman, from the University of Chicago, started writing these theories that the only purpose for a corporation to exist is to benefit the shareholders. And Wall Street kind of used that as a weapon, as the basis to start putting the hammer down on Fortune 500 companies to do things that in theory sounded good for the shareholders, but in reality were just short-term interested, not long-term profit-oriented. So they started to sue corporate boards and really put pressure on CEOs to get rid of pensions, for example. So my dad had a pension. Most of my siblings don't have a pension. But that was good for short-term profits. So the Wall Streeters convinced Fortune 500 boards that, hey, they should get rid of pensions. So they replaced pensions with 401ks, and that's just been a disaster. So I've got actually a little startup that we're hopefully going to be funding here soon that will bring pensions back in a new way that have all the goodness of pensions without some of the troubles for pensions. Because 401ks just have been a disaster. We got an entire 2 generations that'll retire with almost no savings. So if you look back, a lot of this stuff started to come out in the Milton Friedman era. And if you look at those dynamics, it's really utilitarian ethics. So it's okay for me to win. As long as I win more than 100 people lose, it's okay for 100 people to lose. Catholic virtue ethics are very different, right? Catholic virtue ethics say, it's not okay for 100 people to lose. So capitalism that's based on Catholic social teaching and Catholic social doctrine as defined in Rerum Novarum, if Fortune 500 boards were just all reading Rerum Novarum and following that, their profits would be maximized and the world would be a much better place, in my opinion. So I'm trying to get some Harvard Business School profs to prove that definitively in the data on venture capital investments. So let's look at the whole history of venture capital. Let's look at each company and was it fundamentally good or bad for the customer? And then how did those companies return? And my belief is that it's going to show materially higher returns for the companies that love their customers better. Certainly been true anecdotally for all of my companies. And I think if Harvard produces the data, we'll have incredible data that will shock the world. People have said they've analyzed it similarly in the public companies and that there's a higher return. So we got to get the word out. But there was a little bit of an effort to do a version of CST with ESG investing, environmental social governance. But that got very political and some of the S and some of the E, some of the S and the G didn't actually align with CST either. So that kind of came and now it's kind of political. So we're doing a lot of effort to try to get more and more Catholic assets invested with CST screening and rowing in CST principles. I'm doing a lot of work in that area right now. So if the voice in the ear of the Fortune 500 CEOs and their boards is Catholic virtue ethics driven versus utilitarian ethic driven or Old Testament mindset driven, then I think the companies will do the right thing and they'll do better from a profit perspective. But it's absolutely fascinating because and I'm so excited for Pope Leo. I've talked to so many people that have reread Rerum and it's like, hey, the solution to all these problems we're going through are sitting right there in Rerum Novarum. And we just got to let it out. It's over 130 years old. Sometimes the best ideas, we're just, it was great ideas at the time and now we can execute them. So I'm thinking about the system right now of how do Catholic families and Catholic organizations invest their assets? And are their assets aligned with their prayers or not? And Rerum gives us the basis. And then there's another document from the Vatican called Mensuram Bonum, which is really, really good. And then the Pope Francis came out with Antiqua et Nova, which is a really good document on AI and the role of AI in human flourishing. And so if all Catholic assets were kind of screened and filtered and invested with CST principles from Rerum, and Antigua and Mentor and Bonham, we'd have collectively allowed voice for the vulnerable in these companies. And no matter what you do in the nonprofit world to serve the victims of broken systems, man, if capitalism's rowing against you, man, it's hard to make that up with philanthropy.
Yeah.
So this is a big focus for me right now, is just helping some of these huge Catholic asset managers really think hard about these documents, the USCCB investment guidelines, Mentor and Bonham, Antigua, et cetera, and really make it easy for Catholic families and Catholic organizations to invest aligned with our prayers.
Yeah.
And I think
So
if we do that, it's going to be amazing.
So if I were to try to summarize this, that you would say that if somebody's looking to invest and make a return on their investment, which is obviously not a bad thing in itself, as long as they apply this lens of kind of the virtue or the Catholic teachings to it, and there's nothing that's in conflict, and there's not going to be any damages done, then it's a good thing to pursue it. There's no harm in pursuing a return on your investment, correct?
Correct. And I think like you take Chime as an example, right? We did really well on that investment, but we did a lot of good with it. So we made the more we loved our customer, the higher our profits. Lloyd at Looker, actually, he called customer support the Department of Customer Love
Hmm.
at Looker, and it just set the tone of how Lloyd lives his life and lives business. And the culture of a startup tends to take on the moral compass and the culture of the founder. And so the reason why Looker was so successful, Lloyd was a phenomenal product guy, coder, but he also set a culture that, hey, we're here to make our customers happy. So we had tremendous loyalty, tremendous retention. So I think it's a false choice to say you're doing evil in the world if you make a return. Now, you're doing evil in the world if you make a return doing evil in the world. But if you're doing good, the better your business model, the more people you can help, the bigger your, sphere of influence, per Pope Benedict is. You can be usury, but if you're trying to do good, if you're putting those profits to work to do good in the world, it doesn't. Capitalism can be good if it's CST capitalism versus how this Milton Friedman capitalism has kind of manifests itself over the last 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you can align capitalism in a way that you can do good and make money at the same time, then you have a lot of like you said, two forces pushing together, right? It's not just pushing a boulder uphill. You at some point, hopefully, the boulder starts rolling down. You got to chase it.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite phrase with my founders is "do well while doing good."
Yep, exactly.
Right.
One thing I think would be very good to get your take on is you mentioned this earlier, where I forget exactly where that he was at the dean, I think at Notre Dame. You said at the time. And you're saying, "Hey, I'm not just gonna write checks and smile. I'm gonna challenge you." And to me, that sounds like you're applying the lean startup method, if you will, towards some other institution that's not a startup. Could you lay out what you think are the virtues of the rapid iteration kind of startup development mentality? What are the virtues of that we could apply to any other institution?
Yeah, it's really fun, and anybody's interested, they can reach out, and I'll share a little winning metrics document with them that I use with all the folks I coach, and I coach parish pastors and cardinals and bishops and university presidents and lots of startup founders. They're all in the same. It's all the same stuff, right? So who's your customer, right? What's your mission? Who's your customer of that mission? And then what are your top 3 to 5 metrics that tell everybody in your organization how you're doing at serving that customer? And so I've got this set of winning metrics, which is, I haven't changed it. In my early years in venture, I used to update it every year, and I haven't changed it in, probably 10 years now. So I think we got it pretty dialed in. So winning metric 0 is, does it work? So whatever you're trying to do, does it fundamentally make the life of your customer better? So if you're serving a business, is their income statement fundamentally better after you versus before you? That's winning metric 0. You'd be amazed the number of startups running around who don't have any data as to whether it actually works or not. So that's sort of table stakes. Does it work? Winning metric 1 is do they love it? So you ask them some version of the NPS score, and then you ask them why. And if they love it, you ask them why, and that's what you market. That's the things they really care about in your product or solution. If they hate it, you ask them why, and that's what you fix in the product. Winning metric 2 is related. It's not only do they say they love it, but do they show they love it with retention? So you look at retention asymptote charts to say, hey, if somebody comes and uses a product today, how often do they come back, and for how long do they come back, and what percentage of them come back? And then winning metric 3 is probably the holy grail one, which is unit economics. So what's it cost you to get a customer, and then how fast do you get twice that cost back in gross margin? And that tells you what the velocity of your business can be. So if you take $1 off your balance sheet, spend it to acquire a customer, and you get 50 cents, you don't have a business. If you spend $1 and it takes 5 years to get $2, you got a business, but it's not going to be a venture scale business probably. But if you spend $1 and get two within 3, 6, 9 months, you got a chance for something that can be a really fast grower. And then winning metric 4 is just once winning metric 0, 1, 2, and 3 all work, then you scale it. So those same metrics can work for any organization. We do fine-tune versions of them for different types of organizations. Like there's different metrics that we're focused on for Catholic U. But at the core, it's that it really comes down to those same core metrics. So what's your mission? Who's your customer of that mission? What are the metrics that tell everybody in the organization how you're doing at achieving that mission? If you think of winning metrics 0, 1, 2, and 3, it's really cutting to the heart of, how well are you loving your customer? And then how are you doing well while you're doing good? So you might have a great service to the customer, but if you don't have a business model, you're not going to be able to scale it. So that's kind of the core of it. So it applies for anything. Like we got our parish out in California to double in size by applying the same kind of techniques, where we figured out that, once people became active in the parish, they would come every Sunday and they'd learn the 2 greatest commandments and get on a path to heaven. And they'd also give financially to the parish. But we had a whole bunch of people coming in 3 times a year, Christmas, Easter, Ash Wednesday. So we'd have 4 times as many people on Christmas, Easter, Ash Wednesday as we would on any given Sunday. So we started looking at that with a startup lens and say, hey, we got a bottleneck problem, right? Well, we figured out we weren't doing a very good job of welcoming people. So we started trying to have our ushers and our welcomers find somebody they didn't know before every Mass and have a conversation with them. And if they were interested in getting active in one of our ministry groups, we helped to get them introduced to a ministry group leader. Well, you do that, then people belong and matter. They keep coming back. So now I'm actually trying to get canon law changed, because I realized that role of welcoming, of calling, was one of Jesus's 2 roles in his first parish in the world. And that is defined in Book 3 of canon law for evangelists, for missionaries that go out into the hinterland and call the way Jesus did. But the canons that in Book 3 that talk about how to do that are missing in Book 2 that talks about parishes. So from a systems perspective, right, going back to that, if every parish had the role of caller defined in canon law, then all 500,000 parishes would be better at welcoming. Right now, like we moved to Nashville, and the bishop of Nashville's kind of embarrassed by this and wants to fix it, but we went to 5 different parishes over 2.5 years, and living in Nashville in our new diocese, and not a single person has ever reached out their hand and introduced themselves to me and had a conversation with me across 5 different parishes. So easy to fix. If each usher in each parish is given the challenge to find one person that they don't know before each Mass and engage them in conversation, and if they're new to the parish, help them get introduced to a ministry group leader that might be relevant to them, every parish can double in the world. You can apply the system thinking and the same kind of methodology to any kind of organization. It all comes back. Organizations that win are organizations that love their customer, love their employees, love their suppliers, help versus hurt the planet. It's all the same. So it's really fun, because at first I was just coaching founders, and then you start to have a little bit of outsized wealth creation. So then you start getting involved with some nonprofits, and then you realize that a lot of the same mission, customers, metrics stuff works as well there. And then you work with nonprofits enough, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people. But then you realize, hey, these guys are really, for the most part, are helping victims of broken systems. So you learn a lot about unmet needs in work with nonprofits. And then I go to work, once I learn the unmet need, to go, okay, what's a AI tech-enabled system solution we can get going to solve this unmet need, so there's a lot less victims, so that Catholic Charities has a lot less victims of broken systems that they have to help so well the way they do their work.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is actually a really good segue to the final thing I want to ask you is, I find personally a lot of people are a little bit sometimes they don't like the idea of people pursuing the ability to influence the world. They think, you're just pursuing mammon. But you've mentioned a whole bunch of things in here where you're like, hey, I'm trying to get these guys to do this. I'm trying to get these things changed. And you're unabashed about it. You're willing to like look at the system and say, I'm going to try to change that because I can see a better world from it. I don't know exactly how to ask this question, but it's like, where does that come from? Why are you willing to just go do these things? Because you've got so much on your plate already. You could say, I'm doing enough good, but yet you're going to go reach out. You're going to constantly test these things and just try to improve the world in literally so many different ways that you just happen to encounter these different things, and you know there's a problem, so you're going to go pursue it. Like, any things you can share there about the ability to do this because you've had success and why you're willing to go out of your way to try to make these things better.
Yeah, no, it's really fun. It really comes back to Caritas, where we started, Caritas and Veritate. So solve the real need of your neighbor with your God-given skills to the max degree of influence you have in the world. And so for me, if we think about the problems to solve, I coach founders and coach leaders who solve a variety of different problems. So my customer, I kind of treat it as the three customers of Catholic social teaching or Catholic social doctrine. So the vulnerable family, the poor, is one of them. So Chime would fit under there. Cloud Apartments fits under there. The planet, our common home, Laudato Si. So what are solutions that decarbonize the world? A lot of fun stuff going on there from a systems perspective. And then the church, the parish, and the church itself. So those are my three customers. So the vulnerable family, the poor, the planet, the parish, and church. So those are my three customers. Then my God-given skills, what I love doing and what I feel most alive doing is when I'm coaching a leader who's trying to solve one of those three problems, a problem for one of those three customers. And then, as Benedict tells us, do it with the max degree of influence you have in the world. It's sort of, if I have the ability to engage somebody and help them, if they're eager, if they have an important mission and they're eager to be coached, I'll coach them. And if they have an important mission and they're not showing signs of wanting coaching, I'll still nudge. Doing that with one of my alma maters right now, where they've got a tremendous mission and they're just got to get a little more focused on the right metrics. So for the most part, though, I spend my days coaching leaders who are eager to be coached, who have missions that matter to them deeply and matter to me deeply. And so once you start doing that, it's like, not everybody's a system thinker. Not everybody has that mindset. God gives all of us unique skills. And as Benedict says, do it to the max degree of influence you have in the world. So I kind of wake up every day trying to make the world a little bit of a better place each and every day. And for me, it's really fun because I have, so many projects going on at the same time where founders are 100% focused on one problem and one particular solution to the problem. And for me, I have a short attention span. So for me, it's fun. Every hour of my day, I'm talking to another leader who's working on a particular problem. But collectively, man, if all of these folks I'm coaching are successful doing what they're doing, they'll do well for them and their families, but they'll do just massive good in the world.
Yeah, this is amazing. I think this is a great place to end. I just want to say I really appreciate your perspective and your willingness to, especially to that last point you keep mentioning, right? Do it to the max degree that your influence will allow. I think a lot of people undercut their ability. They might say, "Oh, I'm not that important. I'm not that influential." But there's a lot that they could do if they try to, and if they try to, God can take it and make it 10 times or 100 times better than what their own efforts can do. If you're willing to do it in a way that's open to God's hand. So I just really appreciate this. I really believe that if everybody did this, if all Catholic entrepreneurs did this, we would change the world in short order. That's my genuine belief. So anyways.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Yes, I totally agree. I think we've got the right ethics system with Catholic virtue ethics. And so the more we row together, the more we work together, I think we have we're born, Holy Spirit put us here at a unique time. There's a reason why we're all here right now with, in particular with AI and its potential for just massive evil, but just tremendous good. I really truly believe that if good minded people are putting AI to work in a way that really helps human flourishing, I think every family can thrive, and the planet
Yeah,
can
but it's
thrive.
important.
Can thrive.
It's important that we actually try to make thrive, because there's so many people who are, you could see right now building AI systems that are, kind of, there's no particular morality to it, but as a result, it ends up kind of being used for really, really negative things, right? And so that's why it's super important for us to have Catholic builders or morally oriented builders. I know you're involved with Dominus Lab too, so it's obvious that you're you're pushing these things, right? So awesome, Matt.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah,
final
it's fun. All my all faith traditions are awesome. All my founders that have done the best have been active in one of the world religions.
Mm-hmm.
And folks that are just, none of us are perfect, right? We're working to try to be better every day. But, if you've got that effort to try to be better and try to learn and try to grow your empathy and try to get better doing the right thing when nobody's looking every day. Those are the folks that, have the growth mindset that are the ones that I like working with, because, everybody knows I'm very far from perfect. Only our good Lord is.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, where any final calls to action or where people should reach out if they're looking to get mentorship or anything you want to just direct them to?
Yeah, just reach out on LinkedIn. Tim Connors at Pivot North, happy to connect. And then we've got this really neat new comms platform called Vinly.co going. So if you ping me on LinkedIn, I'll connect, and then I'll probably pretty quickly move the convo over to Vinly, and
yeah,
we'll get it going. That has an opportunity to be a really, really big force for good in the world. Communications, conversations that matter is what the founders like to talk about there. If you design a social network to try to help people find their small group the way Jesus and his 12 did versus some of the social networks designs of the most popular social networks today, Vinly has a chance to help everybody find those small groups where they belong and matter together. And man, that would do a great service in the world. So rooting those guys on a lot to get to big scale.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk about them, but I've been using the platform recently, and I quite like it. So we'll have to we're gonna definitely have to get Peggy on at some point to talk about it. But
She's
awesome. Well,
awesome.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Tim. We'll have to do this again sometime, but I'm looking forward to hopefully hanging out in Nashville sometime.
Yeah, great catching up.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, which, it's Tim, I'm pretty sure you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and leave us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. It really helps us to kind of, juice up the algorithm, get us in front of more folks. And if you're not already, go give us a follow on YouTube to help us get up to 1,000 subscribers. As a sidebar, on YouTube, we do publish a lot of shorts, and we also publish kind of mini episodes that we don't publish on Substack. So if you're somebody who likes to watch YouTube while you eat or whatnot, you can go there and get fed some really, really interesting stuff. So maybe you don't have time to listen to every episode, but you want to get some of those things kind of as reminders just showing up in your feed. So go do that for us. Turn the bell on for notifications, comment on the recent episodes, all that stuff. And then finally, be sure to check out the Saintly CEO, our weekly newsletter that in under 1,000 words will help you to learn how to run your business like a saint and discover other Catholic entrepreneurs with our curated list of these folks. I said finally before. Finally, again, Columbo style here. If you are looking for a group of other Catholic entrepreneurs, consider joining our Catholic Founders peer group. Again, it's $10 a month or $100 a year. Literally anybody can afford it. Just go to our Substack and upgrade to paid. You'll also get access to all of our paywalled content as part of this. Keep in mind, if you are a builder and you are Catholic, this is the number one place for you to be. It's kind of like the top of funnel. You get in, we'll help sort you out and get you into other groups, and you're going to be surrounding yourself with other people who genuinely care about integrating the faith into their business, so that way they can change the world. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and we will see you next time.